Hi everybody, we're going to start we're actually going to start now. Good evening, I'm Gwen Robinson, past president and board member of the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. And next to me is our guest of the evening. Before I introduce her and we launch into this, I'd just like to say, particularly for our members, journalist members at the Foreign Correspondents Club, it's been a landmark day of quite a lot of disgrace in the dissolution of the Move Forward Party. And tomorrow night at the club we'll have a special panel with some experts and representative of the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights, as well as a political analyst and human rights expert, to discuss the implications of that move and what's in store for Thai politics in future. So keep that in mind. And on Friday night, we're opening a very powerful exhibition of Myanmar photographs by some Myanmar photographers. So everybody's welcome. Keep that in mind. And now turning to our star of the evening, I'd like to welcome Vietnamese poet and novelist Nguyễn Phan Quế Mai. Welcome, Quế Mai. Thank you. So I first met, I'd been aware of Quế Mai, and in fact my publication ran an article shortly after her hit novel The Mountain Sing came out, but I had not met her until last year at the Bangkok Literary Festival, and I was wrapped in Mountain Sing, but then spellbound by her frank and eloquent account of her life and her work and her view of Vietnam and many other things. As you know, her novels have captivated readers around the world, not just Mountain Sing, but also Dust Child, among 12 books of prose and poetry she has published. I think you've read the blurb, so you know that she's a passionate advocate also for the rights of disadvantaged groups, particularly in Vietnam, a champion of issues such as literacy and promoting that, as well as many other social issues. And her work has won numerous awards and been translated into more than 20 languages. We're very lucky to have her at the club tonight. So I'll just move straight into some questions, not too tough, but I also won't ask too many questions because I'm sure that there are people there you might want to ask questions, so save those. Also feel free to, you can continue ordering food and drinks, the waiters will be around. So I'd just like to kick off with a question to you, Quế Mai. You've published poetry and other books as well as many essays, but obviously the two standouts, at least in terms of international acclaim and sales, are The Mountain Sing and Dust Child. The first is more autobiographical, I think, and the second is focused on the cause of Amerasian children born of the Vietnam War and the devastating consequences of that war. In fact, Dust Child was not only the basis of your PhD research with Lancaster University, but it's also, to me, a masterpiece of journalism in that you conducted such extensive interviews to collect personal stories from across the spectrum of the kinds of characters you write about in that novel. And you even wrote an article which was very journalistic after interviewing some US veterans, and you got involved in real-life searches for family members. To me, I think you take the reader right there, even from the opening pages in the queue at the US consulate in Saigon. So perhaps, I know that quite a few people in this audience have probably read one or both those books, but some haven't. So I wonder if you could perhaps encapsulate what those two books meant to you, and perhaps give readers an idea. And also, if I can ask, you've said in many interviews your characters are fictitious, obviously rooted in deep research, but I was also wondering whether there are any key characters based on real life people that you encountered. So.
Thank you so much, Gwen. It's such a great honor to be in conversation with you. It's like also nerve-wracking to be interviewed by an editor of Nikkei Asia, right? Because she's like an expert in Asia, and so I must say I'm really moved to be here today. I feel at home because I feel like we're having a family dinner together. So thank you so much for being here. This is the first event I've done after 3 months. In the 1st of April this year, when I was in the US for my book tour, I received the news that my father was very ill. So I canceled everything, my whole global book tour of 5-6 countries to be home with him. So I spent the 3 months with him, and to be with him, to take care of him, to talk to him. And I did not know how I could feel when I resumed life again, because life seemed to stop for me then. But my father taught me that life goes on in the stories that we tell. And there are stories that are so important. We must tell them to make sure they are not forgotten. And this is why I'm here today, and this is why I had to write my 2 books, The Mountain Sing and Dust Child. And my father also taught me how precious each moment of life is, because he passed away a few weeks ago. And I want to thank you sincerely for spending this evening with me, because I know each moment of your time is very precious. Before I forget, I want to thank this club for hosting me, one of the oldest clubs, correspondence clubs in Asia. I want to thank my wonderful friend Glenn for suggesting this event and for interviewing me. I want to thank Andy, Peggy, Luke, my wonderful friends, for hosting me, for feeding me, taking care of me. And also here I have my writer friend Pim, who's at the back. Can you wave? She has written a wonderful time travel book called The Moon Represents My Heart. So talk to her and get her book, because it's brilliant. And I also have book club members who have read The Mountain Sing. Raise your hands if you have read my books, one of my books. Wow.
Well, that's about. Oh,
thank you so much. So I feel like I have found a circle of family members after writing this book. So thank you for being, the family of The Mountain Sing and Dust Child. So thank you for this very warm welcome. So when mentioned about the article that I wrote, so in 2012, I interviewed a group of American veterans who were returning to Vietnam. Some of them hadn't returned to Vietnam for more than 40 years, but they were determined to be in Vietnam, to be able to look for the children they once abandoned. By searching for the women whom they had relationships with. So I interviewed some of them, and I got to know about their trauma, their PTSD, and the difficulties they experienced in their lives, but also their determination to make up for the mistakes in their past by walking away from these pregnant women. So I asked one of them, why don't you write a letter to the woman whom you once walked away from, and tell her why you have been spending your life saving now, going back to Vietnam to look for her. So I also interviewed all of the veterans, and I wrote about them on the national newspapers of Vietnam, and I published their photos that they had shared with me. And I thought I had no chance of helping, because these veterans had been on national and international media, for example the BBC. But what stood out in my article, I think, was the letter that I had translated. The letter that I had cried when I translate is a letter of this veteran who told his girlfriend why he had to look for her now. So when I published the article, I received many emails, and then one day there was this email. 3 weeks after the newspaper's publication, I received an email from a person who wrote me and said, "Que Mai, I have never sent an email before, but I'm here at an internet cafe. Ask someone to type this for me. I might know someone who might know someone who might know one of the veterans in your in your article." So, okay, she gave me a telephone number. So I was in Belgium at that time, and I called her, and she didn't have an, like internet, like WhatsApp or Zalo, which is popular in Vietnam. She just had a fixed line number. So I called her, and it was really expensive, and I was like, please be, I want to find out everything very quickly. And she asked me many questions, and it took her 15 minutes for her to take a deep breath, and she said, "Que Mai, I'm the woman in your essay." So she's this beautiful woman in this article, and her name is Hoa. And she, in the year 1968, she worked as a bar girl to serve American soldiers during the war, and she fell deeply in love with her American boyfriend. And when she got pregnant, she tried to tell him, but because her English was really limited, she wasn't sure if he understood her, but he left her then. And she had no choice but to give birth and give the child away. So she told me for more than 40 years she had lived with this regret of abandoning the child, and she couldn't believe that the man was back looking for her. So I united them more than 45 years. And this essay actually, got reconnected an American veteran with an Amerasian child, someone who was like nearly 50 years old and had been searching for his father all his life. So I, just like my novel Dust Child, there are miracles in life. And I think, I worked for years as a journalist, and I think there is a lot of work we can do with journalism. And I admire all of you journalists who have been doing so much for, to bring stability and also peace to our world. So the when also asked me about, the whether they are fictional, like the inspiration from my life for these novels. There are so many questions inside a question, trying to remember now. But for example, I think for each writer, we take each moment of our life and, fictionalize it somehow, because I feel like the work of a novelist is that of a gardener. The more research that we do, the more life experiences that we have, the more fertile our garden is. And from that garden, we grow our fiction. We grow the branches and the trunk of our tree based on our creative writing techniques. But in the end, it's the reader's interaction who makes the tree flower and give fruit. So thank you for reading my novels and keeping them alive, because there is one sentence in my novel Dust Child: if a book is not read, it is dead. So in The Mountain Sing, it's I have fictionalized a lot of personal stories into this novel. For example, I talked about my father before, how instrumental he was to in my life. There was a period that he had to go to South Vietnam to work as a teacher, and he was away from us, and I miss him dearly. And he was really good with his hands, like each Mid-Autumn Festival, he would make the most beautiful lantern in the shape of stars or of fish, of beautiful animals for me to go on, these Mid-Autumn Festival parades. So I imagine that if those years, I was too small, and I imagine that if he were my father who went to war, he would send me back something that he would carve with his hand. So I made up this image of the Sơn Ca bird, and Sơn Ca means the mountains sing. So the bird represents, the symbol of hope and of love. And it is a symbol of my father's love for me as his only daughter. Thank you.
Thanks. That was some opening. Well, as you mentioned, you've got amazing characters in both novels, and I presume, and also throughout your writings, as you've just enlightened us about, much of it based on these real people, but you've got some key and very powerful characterizations in your work, including, for example, Chan and Kin, the two sisters who go to work in Saigon bars, the Amerasian man, Fong, or, the war veteran, who I presume you've interviewed a lot of war veterans in Dust Child, to even, the wonderful grandmother and granddaughter in Mountain Sing. But who are your favourite characters? Did you begin relating? Writers say that the characters become real for them. Maybe they're composites of people you actually know, but they become a blend of those. But they actually, when you're writing, you live in the novel, and they become real. Did you become particularly attached to?
Thank you. I'm going to stand up because then I can see everyone. I think, each character in one of my books is like my own child. So I can't say I love which one more, because like if you have children, you try to love everyone equally. Or at least you should say that in public, right? I think even for the character I hate most in The Mountain Sing, I still love him in a way that he helps me heal. And this person is called Wicked Ghost. This is a person in real life who had killed my own grandmother. So this is, in real life, what happened is that my own grandmother was really hungry during the Great Hunger, which took place in 1945 in Vietnam, which killed nearly 2 million Vietnamese people, around 10% of the population. And this event is rarely known, because Vietnam was a small country, and people don't normally think that we were affected by the Second World War. But at that time, the Americans and the Allies were bombing Vietnam to try to attack the Japanese army. So a lot of our roads were destroyed. So food couldn't get to the population. So a lot of people died. And also we had to supply. At that time, Vietnam was under the rules of both the French army and the Japanese army. So we had to feed the troops. So that's why the huge population went really hungry. So my grandmother in trying to feed their two really young children, she ventured into a cornfield to try and steal corn to bring home. If you read The Mountain Sing, I hope you remember that. And she was captured by someone called Wicked Ghost, who beat her. And in real life, my grandma died on that cornfield because she could not break away from the ropes that tied her to the corn plants. So when my father told me the story, I hated that man, and I wanted to do the worst revenge to him. The best weapon of a novelist? Revenge, right? With our pen, we could do so much. And I wanted, to inflict the worst type of things to his family. But in writing, you find out also your own values and your own beliefs. You really discover the person you are from your own writing. So I discovered that I'm not a violent person. Yeah. So I discovered that instead of revenge, I thought about forgiveness, and I thought about the consequences of violence. I think our world, has this is suffering from this vicious circle of violence, and the more violence we create, we inflict, the more hatred we create, and there's a non-stop circle of violence. So I just pray and wish for more forgiveness and empathy and understanding. So that's why I wanted to forgive him, to be able to heal, you know. So in the end of the book, you see this example or this symbol of forgiveness. So I also think that forgiveness is like one of the best gifts we can give ourselves, because nobody is perfect, you know. I myself have many regrets, and I need to learn to forgive myself each and every day so that I can live with light and live with empathy and love, not just for myself but for other people around me. Thank you.
It's a good approach, I think, to forgive your enemies, but you still manage to, I think, bring out the nasty sides of some of your characters as well as the great sides. That must be the real mastery of your writing. It's actually, to me, incredible to read your eloquent prose and know that English was a language you didn't know until, what was it, 8th grade? And in fact now you are writing, well, I gather, I read that Mountain Sing was your first major work of writing in English. Is that correct? And I gather you wrote your fine poetry, which in translation reads beautifully, but you write your poetry mainly in your native Vietnamese. And I notice you still use a lot of Vietnamese phrases and proverbs, particularly in words, in your English language books, which I presume you deliberately wanted to keep in a lot of these Vietnamese phrasings. And I think the poetic ring of your book owes something to the Vietnamese language, which is very rhythmic and sing-song anyway. So I was curious if you if you feel a different persona writing in English versus Vietnamese, and whether the thought process is different.
So before I started writing in English, I had written 8 books in Vietnamese, and for me, writing in Vietnamese is much easier. I can express myself, you know, really more fluently, and I don't need to use the dictionary. These days, I still need to use the dictionary a lot, and I also have a notebook with new words that I write whenever, you know, I read a good book. But I think writing in a second language, especially, you know, English, that you know, has given me a lot of freedom. First of all, because Vietnam is subject to strong censorship. So, you know, anything that we want to publish in Vietnamese is tightly censored, or, you know, like, for example, you know, like The Mountain Sing, if it were to come out in Vietnam, in Vietnamese, it could be cut significantly. For example, there's a line, there's this line, those who are in power want to rewrite history. So they would want to cut it out. Or, you know, parts about the land reform, which has been like a taboo topic, which is like documented only in people's memories, you know. So few books have been able to be published in Vietnamese about the land reform. So, you know, writing in English for me is a way to kind of fight against censorship. And I must tell you that I was also very scared, you know, when The Mountain Sing was published, because I did not dare to share the New York Times review of my book because it talked about the land reform and how very few Vietnamese wanted, you know, had dared to approach this topic. But, you know, when so I wrote this book, and I thought when my agent sold it to my publisher, I would have time to edit it. So I would cut out certain parts that would then, you know, to help protect myself and my family who still live in Vietnam. But, you know, I had 2 years to work on the editing. And, you know, like, everything that I wrote was like so linked together. If I cut something, something else would not make sense. And also Hương, the young girl in the novel, she's a writer, and she wrote this: if I were to become a writer, I would not bend my pen to please the eyes and ears of those in power. So then I thought, you know, I could not betray Hương, because she had become my life, she had become my own child, she had become everything that I wanted to do, you know, as a writer. So yeah, so I had to keep everything as it was. But luckily in Vietnam, you know, at the moment, the book is used in all the international schools. Actually, I've been, you know, teaching at international schools, talking to students, and, you know, like, there have been no problems. But I know that when the book comes out in Vietnamese, it will be, you know, tightly scrutinized. So there has been a book company who bought, you know, the translation rights, and they have been translating it. But I know that it will take some time, because in Vietnam censorship works like this. First of all, there's no like there's an unwritten rule that certain topics are untouchable, so you cannot publish things about these books. So editors need to protect themselves. They need to protect themselves and their team and their company. So they over censor, you know. So writers have to censor themselves first by cutting out or not writing about certain things, and the editors will not allow the license of certain books, because in Vietnam to be published, you know, in you know, and have your books distributed in public, you need a publishing license from one of the state-owned companies. They have to be state-owned to have that right to give a publishing license. So normally, you know, even the Sympathizer by Viet Thanh Nguyen, which won the Pulitzer Prize, which was adapted into a you know, an HBO series, very popular, but it's not. I know, and I have read the Vietnamese translation, and the book company has gone to all the major all the government publishing houses. Nobody dared to give that publishing license. So that's one level of censorship. The second one is they will cut out certain paragraphs or certain chapters, you know, or they twist or change words. So yeah, I know it because my third book I'm writing about censorship.
Well.
Which is like, I told myself, you know, write something easy like a love story. You know, everybody wants to have like a whippy love story to read. But, you know, when I sit down to write, I like to handle, you know, difficult topics. I don't know why. So I'm writing about censorship and book banning.
But did you think, so okay, did you think, so now you're going to see your novels, which you wrote in English, which was, I presume, far more stressful than writing in Vietnamese, translated by someone else back into your native language. Do you think that would be stressful to read? Because it surely is not going to exactly capture your tone in Vietnamese. Or why don't you write in Vietnamese for yourself and get it translated into English? You want to do it yourself.
Okay, so I thought, because, you know, I became a writer in English because I worked for years as a translator. So I translated more than 10 books. So I thought, okay, when The Mountain Sing was published in English, I would translate it myself. You know what happened? When I sat down to translate it, I rewrote it. Because for me, the way of writing in Vietnamese is very different than in English. You know, Vietnamese is very flowery. You know, our language, we has a lot of, you know, the language is very romantic, and it's a different way. I think differently in Vietnamese and in English. So I tried so many times, but I gave up. And it's like, I'm nervous now because like these translators are really good, but because I know the story inside out, you know, I know that I will spend a lot of time, you know, editing the translations. So I don't know, I'm nervous with, you know, with seeing the translations because I know that it will take time. But talking about writing in two languages, could you like to hear one of my poems in Vietnamese and then English? Yeah. Thank you. Maybe I can read for you a poem I wrote for my father. I feel like he's here with me today, with all of us today. Maybe I read it first in English for you to understand, and then in Vietnamese. So you know, like unlike a novel which captures like long periods of history or a lot of research, for me poetry is like each poem captures a moment in time. And this poem captures the moment when my father saw me off. At that time, I got a scholarship to go to Australia to study, and my flight would depart from Hanoi. And we had no money, so he had to see me off at the train station in Ho Chi Minh City. And so we lived in the countryside at that time, so he traveled to Ho Chi Minh City with me, and he saw me off for me to go on to Hanoi and to take that flight. My father, I board the train, clouds blur my father's hair, the train's hooting bursts into tears. My father's fragile figure, the afternoon wind cuts into us chilling. Heavily the turns of separation turns. Behind me the dry fields are uneven in the scorching sun. My father's hands hardened and scarred, sprinkling green seasons to come on the fields. Under his back, stories of the seasons of rice harvest. The words of good work sing out with the sweat and hope he breathes every day. It has taken me half my life to understand that my father's gaze, his smile, and his silence are my most precious inheritance. I can now read his thoughts. Alive behind his simple faded shirt, love overflowing, choking his heart. The love he dedicates to me that sweetens the rivers in the scorching season. I stand before the field that my father sowed, listening to the green lights rise under the earth. Cha tôi lên tàu mây nhòa tóc cha, tiếng còi tàu bật khóc. Dáng cha gầy gió chiều cứa buốt, nặng lăn những vòng quay chia ly. Tôi đi bỏ lại sau lưng cánh đồng cằn khô lô xô nắng hàng. Bàn tay cha chai sạn rắc mùa xanh trên những cánh đồng. Dưới tấm lưng người là chuyện kể của những mùa thóc. Lời nhọc nhằn thánh thót mồ hôi là hy vọng thở từng ngày trong ngực. Đi gần nửa đời người, tôi mới ngỡ được ánh mắt cha, nụ cười cha và tất cả sự im lặng của cha hơn mọi gia tài. Tôi mới đọc được những điều cha nghĩ, nghe sau chiếc áo sờn bình dị, những yêu thương chảy nghẹn trái tim người, những yêu thương cha dành cho tôi, ngọt con sông mùa nắng khác. Tôi đứng trước cánh đồng ngày xưa cha gieo hạt, nghe đất mùa nao nức tình cha.
So are all your poems written in Vietnamese?
Yes,
And translated by you, or?
Yes, so I wrote a few hundred poems in Vietnamese.
A few hundred?
And there was some time that if a day I didn't write some poetry, I would feel I haven't done any work for the day.
Yeah.
Poetry was like a part of my life. It was more like food and drink. So I had to write poetry to feel alive. So sorry, I'm in a mood for poetry. Would you like to hear a poem for my mom?
Go on.
Okay, I need to dedicate this to my mom as well. My mother's rice. I hope you're eating rice tonight.
Some people are.
Through the eyes of my childhood, I watched my mother who labored in a kitchen built from straw and mud. She lifted a pair of chopsticks and twirled sunlight into a pot of boiling rice. The perfume of a new harvest soaked her worn shirt as she bent and fed rice straws to the hungry flames. I wanted to come and help, but the child in me pulled myself into a dark corner where I could watch my mother's face, teach beauty how to glow in hardship, and how to sing the rice to cook with her sun-baked hands. That day in our kitchen, I saw how perfection was arranged by soot-blackened pans and pots, and by the bent back of my mother, so thin she would disappear if I wept or cried out. Thank you.
Are you going to read it in Vietnamese?
It's okay.
Okay. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. So all those poems are written in Vietnamese, though, and then you translate them.
Yes, I translated them by myself, and then with the editing help of an American veteran, Bruce Weigel. So Bruce fought in the Vietnam War in 1967 and 1968. He was, at the most deadly battlefield in Vietnam, Quang Tri. So he was injured badly, and upon his return to America, he was looking for, he saw diaries of Northern Vietnamese soldiers, his former enemies, and he saw flickers of some poetry. So after the war, he looked for them in the archives, and he translated them. He spent years translating them into this collection of poetry from captured documents. So that anthology was so important because he wanted to show the American public the humanity of the Vietnamese soldiers, and that's the power of literature. So, I had known Bruce. I worked for years translating for veterans who had been returned to Vietnam because, I was really moved that people wanted to come back and to build schools, to help in hospitals. So I volunteered to help them, and then I met writers. So I volunteered to translate their literature because I was just so moved by their work. So when I read Bruce's poetry, I felt, like this needs to be read by the Vietnamese public. So I translated his work. So after, my translation was published in Vietnam, then he offered to help with my translations because he said, you spend years translating people's work, how about your own poetry? And then I started translating my own. And after years of working on translating poetry, then I switched to, then I was thinking, okay, nowadays, not a lot of people read poetry. So my translations didn't sell very well internationally. So I was looking for a novel to translate. I thought, okay, I need to make a living now from my translation work, not doing this year after year as a volunteer. So I was looking for a novel to translate. So I was looking for a long time. And then one day I thought, why don't you write this novel yourself to save you the need to translate? So this is the beginning of The Mountain Sing.
Right, okay, well.
That's a true story.
I believe it. But I think what's more interesting about your start in writing is what came before that. And I'm basing this on hearing you talk last year as well, and also reading some of your interviews. You've said, the seeds of your writing dream were sown when you were growing up in your native Ninh Binh, northern Vietnam, and you said you were inspired by your mother's lullabies and storytelling and your father's interests in books, but you went into relatively, let's just say, very mundane lines of work, office work, and was it accountancy or something like that? Marketing, back office management, whatever. And later, you moved into this, I guess, translation after you learnt English, at grade 8, and into this writing career against incredible odds. Your poems had not done that well in the beginning, so you kept going, and you must have had some very strong faith in yourself. I mean, were there moments you thought to give up? what were the hardest times? Did you really think you would just keep going?
Thank you. That's a very a great question. I think you know, every writer has moments of doubt. You know, because like unlike other jobs, we don't get paid every day. We may work for years on a book without any chance of it being published. And this is how I felt when I quit my full-time job, you know, sitting at home and to write The Mountain Sing. You know, at that time I had been, you know, working as a consultant for UN agencies in communication strategy design, in gender mainstreaming. I did a lot of, you know, like research on how, for example, on child labor, on human trafficking, doing really interesting work and getting paid quite okay. And then, you know, and my, you know, so one, and before that I had, you know, written short pieces of work, and then I decided I would stay at home and write this book. And there were so many moments of doubt. I thought, how crazy is it? You know, there are so many Vietnamese publishers who wanted my next book, and here I was trying to write in English. And you know, like, unlike the Vietnamese publishing industry in English, you need to have an agent. You need to have, you know, someone who can believe in you. And I think in the end, you only need that one person. So it took me years and years and years. But I think in the end, you know, for me, that, you know, I didn't write to, you know, I'm really lucky that my husband told me, go and do your art. You know, art is important as food and money. It's even more important than food and water for us. And I will take care of our family then. So that's how I could, you know, have this confidence that, okay, I could spend some years working on this book. But there were many moments of crisis, you know, like friends would tell me, oh, let's go for coffee. And I'm saying, no, I have to stay at home and write this book. And it took years, but you know, there were characters who would call out to me, who would wake me up at night, who would say, get up and write, our stories cannot sleep unless you tell them. I was really compelled by the books that I wrote, because I felt like, you know, there are so many silences in our history that need to be honored. You know, there are so many parts of our history that I cannot let them be forgotten. You know, even in Dust Child, I write about these bar girls who had to sell their youth to American soldiers to be able to survive. And if you look at Hollywood movies, you know, that include the images of bar girls, normally they are there to say stupid things, you know. They are there to appear as objects, as sexual objects, or as background for the American stories. And I wanted to write about their humanity. I wanted to present them as fully human, you know, their history, their families, their hope and their dream. So, you know, I really felt lost also, like I felt lost in these worlds, and I really felt alive when I was working on the book, and it gave me the most satisfaction. So I think I had no choice but to write, if you know, if it makes sense.
Well, it's obviously was your destiny, but I'm going to turn over to the audience after a final question. I think there's still a lot to ask. I've actually got 10 more questions, but I'm going to stop it at one more, which is that, sorry, you know, you've studied, lived and worked in countries as diverse as Indonesia, Central Asia, Europe, and even, as you said, Australia for 5 years. I mean, without picking up an Australian accent, that's pretty good.
That's terrible.
I know, it's really good. And you're even living with an Australian family. And, you know, your education in the UK, your PhD, and now with your diplomat husband, and grown children. Your children are in different European countries and the UK, and you've become literally a world citizen, also obviously continually returning to Vietnam. And your books also have gone totally global, translated into 20 plus languages. So where do you feel most at home, and what countries influence you the most as a writer and and in other ways? You're obviously, I don't think you're very Australian.
I think I feel most at home when where my readers are. Thank you. So I feel at home today. I feel totally comfortable. That's why I had the courage to talk about censorship, because like before every event I say, don't talk about censorship, don't touch on that taboo topic. But I feel confident, I feel at home, so that's why I could open up about, you know, such a sensitive topic. But I love to be in Vietnam. You know, Vietnam is like, you know, I didn't leave. I first left Vietnam when I was 19 years old to go to Australia to study. And I returned to Vietnam often. And, you know, I just like Vietnam has also some challenges, but I think I admire really the hard work, the work ethics of the Vietnamese people and our determination to go forward, you know, to build a better life. So I'm very inspired every time I return home. And, you know, because my husband has been, you know, on different missions, so I had to follow him. But for me to return home is to make my pages alive with Vietnam, with Vietnamese language, with Vietnamese food, with Vietnamese people. So I'm sorry if you get hungry when you read my books, because I fill the pages with my favorite dishes. For example, you know, like tiny shrimps caught in the rice field, cooked with star fruit, freshly picked from my own garden. So, you know, I bring in a lot of things from my own memories, yeah. So thank you very much for this wonderful conversation, and the floor is open to all of you for some questions.
Yes. Okay, I was just going to briefly follow up. I would have taken that you feel most comfortable in Vietnam, but between the various European countries you spend a lot of time in, and Southeast Asia or other countries, whether you feel, I know you said you feel most at home with readers around you, but also are there countries that actually inspire you or make you feel more creative?
I think each country inspires me in a certain way. You know, like everything where I visit, I try to learn about the culture and history and try to immerse myself into it. My husband is is from Germany, so I think I have never lived in Germany because of our travels, but you know, for my family history, my in-laws' family history, I'm very much inspired as well. So I think, you know, we have done really difficult postings as well. We were in Bangladesh, for example. But I must say that I have loved everywhere I have been, because everywhere I have learned a lot. I've met a lot of good friends, you know, and, you know, my time in every place has taught me really valuable lessons.
Right, and in our discussion before the panel, you did say you were about wanting to maybe give an observation about being back in Thailand, where you really seem to have some inspiration there.
You know, like once upon a time when I was dreaming to be a writer in English, I used to go to Thailand to buy English books. Because like in Vietnam, there was no English bookshop, you know, so I used to go here to be able to find books in English. So Thailand is a very important destination for me. And I must say, all of you guys are so lucky to live here. You know, I've been like eating Thai food and closing my eyes and it's like, oh, this is so good, you know. This is eating, this is like cuisine.
We hope it might reflect in maybe some future work.
Yeah.
Anyway, if anyone would like to ask a question, the microphone is over there. It is very packed, so if you really have difficulty getting out of your seat and you have a loud voice, you could stand up.
I have one question.
Okay, speak up, and could you identify yourself?
Yes, of course. I'm Richard Cleveland, and my question is, would it be possible to have a uncensored Vietnamese translation of your novels, say in the United States or in France, some country that has a large Vietnamese expat community?
Thank you. Oh, so this is the copy of Richard. The Mountain Sing. So Richard is, he just met me now, but he said he bought this book when it first came out and read it. So thank you so much, Richard, for being here. Actually, there are several Vietnamese versions of The Mountain Sing on the internet for people to download for free. So I was contacted by 3 different people who proudly told me, oh, your novel is so important for Vietnamese people. I spent like 3 months translating it. And because, like in Vietnam, people don't have this notion of copyright. So if they think they love a book and they translate it, they do a favor for the author. So 3 different translators contacted me, and I felt so bad when I said, "Oh, please, the copyright, belongs to my U.S. publisher." But anyway, they are there on the internet. So if you search, you can find them. So there are quite a few people have contacted me, and tell me they have read it. And recently, this is a real story, and it's still on my Facebook. So one of my Vietnamese American friends gifted me, a shirt with, the title "Dust Child" printed. So I posted a post to say thank you to her, and then somebody commented, "Where do I buy this book in Vietnam?" And another Vietnamese commented, "I have it on PDF. If you want, I can send it to you." And she commented in public on my Facebook, on my own Facebook. And then I messaged her and said, oh, why are you doing this? She said, "Oh, because I love your work. I think more people should read it."
So have you read these amateur translations?
I have read them, yes.
Are they painful?
I can see a lot of efforts from these translators who put a lot of work into translating them, and of course I could edit a few things, but I mean, like after contacting so many different websites and convincing them to take them down, I kind of gave up. In Vietnam, if a book, one proof that a book is popular is shown by the fact that it's pirated. So we have a black market for books. So recently, like there was this very popular memoir I could not find in bookshops. So I found a street, and so I bought it, and it was even then cheaper than the official price. And I found out it was a fake book. It looks completely official. It had all the colorful pictures and everything, but it was fake. So the thing is, the printing houses who had the original version of the book could send the PDF to someone else, and they print it if a book is popular. So if the price of a book, for example, is like $10, they would sell it in this black market for like $5. And it looks completely like official. And there is in Vietnam, there's no one going around and say, you shouldn't be doing that, you should be fine. So one really like challenge of doing in Vietnam is like the lack of respect for copyright, not just in books, but in many other areas. So you see many pirated, videos and
right. But you still feel that it's worth going ahead with this Vietnamese translation?
Yeah, I mean, I want to have
an official translation.
An official translation
that you have input into.
Yeah, but I'm afraid that it would be cut, so I don't know. It will see. It will depend.
We'll see.
Thank you, Richard. Sorry for the long answer.
Microphone, if you could, please. Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Sorry, if you can easily get out, because this is recorded, so otherwise things don't go on record.
Oh, yes, please.
Yes,
go
you
ahead.
can.
Go ahead.
Well, let's. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I'm curious since.
Could you identify yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Marion. I wanted to know, I'm really quite curious. Now that you've traveled the last 20, 30 years of your life, do you think today you could have written these books like today, you know, with all your experiences, do you think you can still write these books?
Thank you. I mean, these books, I finished these books very recently. So The Mountain Sing, I finished editing in 2020 after 7 years of writing it. So Dust Child is new. So Dust Child was published in just last year. Also, I think you asked me a question that I forgot to answer. Now I just think about it. You asked me to briefly summarize or talk a lot about the book. So The Mountain Sing is like Vietnam's 20th century history via the viewpoints of 4 generations of a Vietnamese family. So what happened to them, you know, to the 4 generations of this family. So if you read it, you understand the impact of the French and the Japanese occupation of Vietnam, the American war in Vietnam, the war's aftermath, the Great Hunger, the land reform. There's many historical events there. And Dust Child is about Amerasian children of American soldiers and Vietnamese women who were born and abandoned during the Vietnam War. So I have an American character in the book, 2 Bai girls, and a mixed person who's trying to find his family. Yeah. These brief summaries about the book.
That was a great summary. Thank you.
Yeah, so I had a question about censorship.
Could you just identify yourself, please?
Michael Cohn. I'm just a teacher. I'm not a journalist or anything like that.
Sure.
Yeah, so my question about censorship in Vietnam, so I lived in Vietnam for a little while, and just from having spoken to you know, I taught a lot of Vietnamese businessmen and executives, and my general understanding was that there's sort of, that in some cases, like the way licenses are given and permits and sort of like official type stuff, that the way this can be done can be sort of like uneven and inconsistent, and there's a lot of sort of, I don't know how to say it, but just something that can't be, like, is not consistent with regulations. So I was just, and I understand censorship is kind of a different thing because, you know, that there's like a political concern with that, and whereas like a business, whether a business gets a license or not, it's not such a huge issue from like a political standpoint, but if something's going to get censored or not, that's sort of like more of a high level concern. So. But I'm wondering, even so, are there certain so 2-part question. One part is like, are there certain editors certain companies that kind of get like preference and they have more leeway, and are there any significant examples of anything like really sort of incendiary that's been published in Vietnamese, or like what's the, if there's any precedence of that. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the question. So, you know, because there are so many books published every day in Vietnam, so sometimes so the censors can't read everything. So when a book is published, they may wait for the public's reaction on it. So if there are a lot of feedback from people say, oh, this is very sensitive or political, they may, issue a ban. It's not a ban, but it's like a decision to withdraw it from the market. So it happens to quite a few books of my friends. Their book was released after a few weeks, and there's a response from the readers, and then the censors.
These are by Vietnamese in Vietnamese.
Yes. Yeah. So then they issue this decision, and then all the book have to be, withdrawn from the market and destroyed by the publisher.
Okay. Yeah. And then if someone still retains a copy of the book, are there consequences for that, or?
There is a black market for books, for banned books, as I said. And recently, there is one of my most beloved books is called Mối Chúa, the Queen Termite.
Queen what?
The Queen Termite. Termite.
Oh, termite.
Yes, the Queen Termite. So this is written by this really brave writer called Ta Duy Anh, and he writes about corruption in land You know, how the land grabbing business from corporations and influential officials. And he wrote about it, and then he had to assume a pen name because he's known to be really like provocative. So, you know, so he assumed a very like strange pen name, so nobody knew it was him. So then the book was published, and then a few weeks later it was recalled from the market and destroyed, and now it was translated and published in Singapore. The English translation is available, and then the Vietnamese version is also available in the black market. And recently, a bookseller was fined for selling it online. She was fined for more than $10,000.
But what about the publisher? What happened to the publisher?
So these publishers are not official anymore. They are black market copies. So they are, just printed by someone.
Like in some back room on
So then I know the bookseller who imported the English translations. This bookseller does not even have a storefront. She sells it behind the scene. She does not have a store because it could be too dangerous, right? So she imports books and and she sells it, and then she ordered like more than 100 copies of the Queen Tamite, and now she's afraid to sell it because of the $10,000 fine. And she told me what I'm going to do with the copies now, and she's really scared. So that's the situation. Thank you.
My name is Lance Woodruff. I'm a freelance. Sad term based on my own name. Earlier, before the event, you told me that you now live in Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan. And my question, you've said very nice things about the food that's available in Bangkok. Are there any Vietnamese restaurants you would recommend if we show up in Bishkek?
Hi, Lance. Thank you for the question. The best restaurant in Bishkek is in my kitchen.
So are you inviting everyone?
Yeah, if you come to Bishkek, I love to cook, as you can see from my books.
Don't all go at once.
But I think, there are two Vietnamese restaurants, but I think the issue is that we don't have all the herbs and the vegetable, even ginger and chili. Lemongrass is so hard to get. That reminds me, I should buy all of these ingredients and bring in my suitcase and put in the freezer, because Kyrgyzstan is like more or less a desert country, so it's very difficult to grow things or to get Asian herbs. Yeah.
That's an original question. Have you ever been asked that?
No.
Nobody's ever asked that. Our piano player up there has a question.
Hi.
And thank you for your lovely piano playing before the event.
Thank you. Sorry. My name is Leighton Tonkin, and I was wondering, with the censorship laws, I understand there's a fine, but I was wondering, what's the fullest extent of the law you've ever seen when it comes to censorship? Has it ever gotten to a violent point?
Thank you. So censorship, there have been quite a few arrests in Vietnam. The latest is on a blogger called Huy Đức. He wrote this book, Bên Thắng Cuộc, The Victors. So he wrote the book quite a while ago doing his fellowship in the US, and he thought he would not be able to return to Vietnam due to his, political writing in the book. But he returned and he was okay, but he kept a very popular blog called Ô Xin Huy Đức, and he was arrested 2 months ago, and we don't know the reason for his arrest yet. So people assume that it's about his writings on corruption, and so yeah. I see some of you filming, so it's for your own. So no social media on censorship, please.
And one more. Please identify yourself.
Tom Vasey. Thank you very much for your talk. I'm very much looking forward to reading your books. Obviously, there's quite a lot of literature and movies in English, produced mainly by Western people, Americans and so on, about the relationships during the war between the Vietnamese local population and the Americans, and before them the French. You mentioned that there are sort of gaps in the history in Vietnam, partly because of the censorship. I wonder if there is much literature about the war and how it deals with the relationships between the local population and essentially the occupying forces, if you like, during those periods.
Thank you. You mean the literature, about the Vietnamese population interaction with the American forces, for example, right? There's a lack of literature on that because I mean there have been some new titles in this area, but it has been quite limited. So I think so we have been very much encouraged to write about the victory of the northern Vietnamese side and how we won the war and how heroic everything was and the sacrifices of our people. So most literature that was promoted and published was on that. So recently more people moved towards writing about reconciliation between Vietnamese and the former occupying forces. Also, because the Vietnam War was fought very much between North Vietnam and South Vietnam. So a lot of literature now is written about, the impact of our people of both sides, which I documented a lot in these two books. Because in reality, a lot of Vietnamese families had family members who fought for either both North Vietnam and South Vietnam. So they became the enemy within their own family. So the issue of forgiveness and reconciliation is very personal and very, very difficult. So, I think there's a lot of healing there because it's a very painful subject. I think it's easier to forgive outsiders than to forgive your family. And I think, because the Vietnam War lasted for so long and people really fought against each other on opposite sides. So nowadays, the pain is still very, very sharp and alive. And within the government, like even certain terms, for example, 30th of November, 30th of April is the end of the war. So in Vietnam, the official term is Ngày Giải phóng, Liberation Day. So people in south of Vietnam don't like that term, right? Because they said we were free, even more free than after the war. So they prefer nowadays some media outlets use a more neutral term. It is called Ngày Thống Nhất, Unification Day, which is, I think, is a better term. So, I think as a writer, I'm really conscious of the terms that I want to use in my book because I want to be neutral and be respectful of every side's trauma because, all sides were really deeply traumatized. So if you as a writer, I feel like I need to educate myself so I can be empathetic to all sides and use terms which are not like trauma provoking for people.
Can I add on a little bit? I kind of said this earlier. Whatever happened in the Vietnam War, the Americans, it affected Thailand tremendously.
Yes.
In fact, the story that you wrote in Dust Child,
Yes.
I can just relate to because it changes the whole country
Yes.
in Thailand.
Yes.
Without the Vietnam War, Thailand would not be Thailand today.
Yes.
Okay, and
Yeah.
we wouldn't even have an international school. I mean, it's that, impact.
Yeah.
And the school was actually built on all the American soldiers' family coming here. They had to open a new campus just for them to go to school.
Right.
Okay, so the money that came from the war, the U.S. government giving it to Thailand, has a huge effect on the economy. And also the prostitution didn't start until same thing as Thailand. I
Right.
remember it so well because we had a lot of problems, you know, from the school and the students and the family, because a lot of the women are left behind here, and they become, you know, they have problems because their husband is fighting in the war. So it really did affect it, at least this country, a lot.
Yes.
Okay, and I just keep thinking, if it didn't happen, what would happen to here? I mean, Thailand would not be what you see at all.
Yeah, I think that could be said for a lot of countries and a lot of wars, actually. So with that, I think we've kept you at it long enough. I do want to say that both Que Mai's novels, Mountain Sing and Dust Child, are over there for sale at a special discount tonight, and also the author is here. So if you were thinking of buying them at all, Asia Books has them over there, plus a selection of other Vietnam-related and Southeast Asian-related books and novels. So have a peruse, and do follow Que Mai, and I'm sure, when is your next book out, Que Mai?
Now you put a lot of pressure on me.
Sorry.
Now I have to go home and work.
No, you can have dinner after this.
But thank you so much for a wonderful
Well, you're not
conversation
telling us
today.
when it's out.
I am like
Next year?
I'm halfway through my novel. It is keeping me awake at night also. Very like, yeah. For me, I think this is also an important topic to write about, but I can't wait for it to be finished and to share it with you. Thank you for being here today, for your time, and thank you Asia Books for supporting
Yes. Thank you
and
to
for
Asia
giving
Books.
such a generous discount. And books make the best gifts. I'm not selling them, Asia Book. Asia Book is selling these copies. So thank you very much, and thank you,
And
really.
thank you all for coming. Thank you, Que Mai. Yeah. And please support the Foreign Correspondents Club. Keep an eye on our website or Facebook. And have a good evening. The bar will remain open, and the kitchen closes in about 20 minutes if you're still hungry. Thank you.